Hey y'all, so today I'm going to answer the question, how do you remove board members from your nonprofit? Let's get into this one. Hey y'all, this is Tiffany with Boss on a Budget. I help new and small nonprofits get up and running and also raise money for their new nonprofits. If you need help starting your nonprofit, make sure you are subscribed to this channel because I drop videos every week. And so I wanted to tackle the question today around how to remove board members. And I just want to get this out the way right away. I'm not going to be answering this question directly. And the reason why I can't do that is because a lot of this is governed by state law and by what's in your bylaws. Now, I'm going to delve into a little deeper by what that means, but I also just want to make sure it's clear to all of you watching this is that there's not one straight answer. A lot of it depends on how you're set up and you're structured, and you need to be paying more attention to that more than anything. So if you really want to get the answer to your question, it requires a lot of thought. And so I want to give you, in particular, 3 ways or 3 things you need to be thinking about when you need to remove board members. So typically when I get this question, it's because a nonprofit is dealing with a toxic board member, or they have an inactive board member and they're trying to figure out, how the heck can I get rid of this person? Like, what is the process? What am I supposed to do? What makes it official? So I'm going to try to shed some light on that today, and hopefully it'll help you as you navigate this nonprofit startup space. For those who are trying to navigate dealing with a toxic board member or trying to figure out how to roll somebody off, I do have a tip that can help kind of prevent this happening in the future. So if you wait to the end of the video, I want to give a tip that I've seen has been helpful and has been useful for people when they do need to kind of quickly remove a toxic board member or someone who's just not the right fit for the board. All right, so let's get to point 1. A lot of this is governed by your state law and by what's in your bylaws, and I'm going to explain what I mean by both of that. So state law governs how nonprofits are supposed to operate. So depending on the state that you set up your nonprofit in, there may be some state code or laws or regulations that speak to how you're supposed to remove board members or how board members are supposed to roll off of your board. Okay, so your state law may talk about term limits, right? They may talk about it that way. They may also talk about how to remove a board member when you need to remove someone prematurely. So every state law is different, and so you need to reference that when you're thinking about doing this to make sure that you're following the laws of the state that you're in. The other thing around this is the bylaws. So your bylaws is your internal document that you create as a board of directors that governs how your nonprofit is supposed to work. And in particular, it speaks to how the board operates and how the board makes decisions. So in your bylaws, you likely have a clause, or if you don't, you should have a clause or a section that talks about terms for board members, when board members are elected, how board members are rolled off, and how to remove a board member before that person's term limit is up. So if you have that listed in your bylaws, or there's something in your state law that speaks to that, you absolutely need to refer to that first. So anything that you attempt to do to remove someone, you need to refer to the law and the bylaws first to make sure you're doing everything you said you were going to do, because you don't want that to be questioned or challenged legally, and you don't want to get yourself in a world of trouble. So that's the first consideration. Like, look to your state law and look to your bylaws to see what it says about how to remove board members and how you're supposed to approach that process. The other consideration I want to talk about is that there are different types of removal for board members, so you need to be clear about what processes happen for which kind of removal. So there are removals in terms of like someone rolling off. If they've hit their term limit, they've served for a number of years, and they automatically roll off, that may be considered a way to remove board members. Or if you want to prematurely remove a board member before their term limit is up by either voting that person out or speaking with that person and asking that person to resign. So there are a couple ways that you can go about this. It can either be introduced or initiated by the person who you're trying to remove, or it can be initiated by an individual board member or the board as a collective. So the reason why I'm bringing this up is because when you're creating your bylaws, you want to take into consideration all those different scenarios, because the process for how to remove someone or how to take someone off the rolls when their term limit is up is different than someone resigning from the board or someone being removed from the board. And so you need to make sure that those processes are clear and understood by all, because you don't want any confusion, and you don't want to be in a position where a board member is kicked off of the board, but it's not clear how you had precedent for doing that, or whether that's even written somewhere in a policy, whether you even have the authority to do that. I just want to put a point right here, first of all, that I am not a lawyer, and so when it comes to things like this that could be legally challenged, don't rely on a person talking to you on YouTube. You need to refer to a legal representative in your state or an attorney in your state, and they can help advise you according to what's prescribed in law. So I give this information on YouTube for general information so you can be aware of the different options available to you, but it's really up to you to go deeper and do your research to figure out how to approach this. The other thing I'll say is that I recorded a masterclass on the role of boards. I talk a little bit about how boards are to be governed, important policies you need to have as a board, how to recruit board members. I recorded a class that was over 2 hours, and so if you want a replay on how boards are supposed to be structured and you need help with that, make sure you check out the link in the description box below, and it will take you to the replay of the board masterclass. The third consideration that you need to think about when you're trying to remove a board member is that you need to document all decisions. So you don't want to be in the position as a founder or as a board chair saying, I don't want this person on my board anymore. I'm just going to remove them. I'm just not going to invite them to meetings anymore. You don't want that open-ended. You need to document the process and document the decision. And that's not something that can be a decision made by one person. Right? I want to remind you that as a nonprofit founder, you don't necessarily have a say or a vote that weighs more than anyone else on the board. So you do not necessarily have the right to just say, I don't want this person, and you just remove that person yourself. This is something that requires discussion among the board about the best approach and how to handle this. And honestly, if you're talking about dealing with people, instead of just removing someone and not even giving them a heads up or not even doing any prep work around that, it's best to talk to the person first. You probably will avoid a lot of tension if you just address the issue head on and talk about what that person is able to do or whether or not it's time for them to move on from your board, instead of just kind of going behind someone's back or just trying to do something to move the process along. So the biggest point of consideration here is that you need to document decisions that you make around people you're removing, and you need to have decisions documented. And that decision is not one person's decision. It is a decision of the board as a collective. And when you are making decisions about removing a board member, you need to make sure that you have a quorum, meaning that you have enough board members present to be able to vote on a certain matter so that that vote is actually binding, right? And so if you need help understanding what a quorum is, and you need help understanding more terms around how your board is supposed to operate and make decisions, then you need to check out my board's masterclass, which is linked below. So recording decisions in your meeting minutes makes it official, and it's an official record that you can refer back to, or if other people question the move that you made, you can go back to your meeting minutes as an official record of that decision. But you also may consider other ways to document it in terms of a final letter that's given to board members, or a process that you put in place where there's like an exit interview, or there's something that's put in place to help smooth over decisions, especially if someone being removed from the board or moving on from the board is premature, especially if it's early, right? So try to do everything you can to preempt any tension or any issues later on down the line. Now, as I said in the beginning of this video, this will look different nonprofit to nonprofit. Some nonprofits may approach it a different way and may have a more personal touch, and other nonprofits may be more official and just send documents or letters. It all depends, and you absolutely, going back to point one, need to start with what the state law says and what your bylaws say. Your bylaws will probably go into more detail around how to approach it and what's the right process for it, or a policy that you have in place may go into more detail, but you got to take notes and first follow the law and what you put in your bylaws before you make any decisions or before you move forward. The moral of the story is, I can't tell you how to remove a board member for your nonprofit because this is so variable and this is so different. I can give you suggestions or tell you what other organizations do, but the biggest suggestion overall from the 3 points that I talked about is that you need to make sure this is well documented and people are aware of decisions that are being made. And if you're doing this prematurely, so if you're asking someone to leave before their term is up, you better make sure you dot all of your I's and cross all your T's so the decision isn't questioned later on, or if it's questioned later on, you at least have a record of how that you came to that decision. I promise at the end of the video to give you a tip to kind of avoid a lot of the issues that you may encounter when you need to remove someone. What I've seen other nonprofits do to avoid some of this is that they'll put certain stipulations into the bylaws, but also into board member agreements around how a board member is supposed to operate or how they're supposed to participate in board activities, so that if they do not participate or they do not engage fully, then that automatically means they need to be considered to be removed. So you're putting in accountability measures that the board member has to live up to. So there's no question when it comes up that there may be an option that that person needs to be removed, because you can point to those accountability measures and say, well, you agreed to this and you haven't met those standards, which is why you're now up to being considered to being removed, right? So an example of that could be if you don't participate in more than 50% of the meetings, that may cause a motion to remove you from the board. The most common thing I've seen, it really is around attendance at meetings, and that really matters because a board member cannot fulfill their duties if they're not in attendance in the meeting, hearing the updates, knowing what's going on with the business of the nonprofit, so they can make sound decisions as a fiduciary of the nonprofit. If I'm saying words that are foreign to you, make sure you check out this other video where I talked about what is a board of directors. I want to make sure we're all clear. But a board member cannot make good decisions and protect the interests of the organization if they have no clue what's going on. So if a board member is not showing up, yes, it's completely justified to consider the fact that they may need to be rolled off and don't need to be a board member at this point in time. My point to you, given everything that I said already in this video, is make sure, again, you communicate to that board member what the issue is. Make sure you have a process in place to address it. You may want to consider putting a process in place for them to counter or for them to respond, but whatever it is, make sure there's an outline process for this and you have official documentation so it's clear why you made the decision, why you made the vote for that person to be rolled off of your board. Now, there's no way I could cover all the scenarios. I just tried to think about those scenarios where you really don't need this person on your board anymore. They're really not participating or they're not good for the organization. So I tried to present it from that scenario, but there are many other scenarios that you may encounter. And again, every nonprofit is different, so I can't tell you how to do it. All I can say is follow state law, follow your bylaws, and make sure that you document your processes. All right? Thank you so much for watching. If you need help with your nonprofit, you can always visit me at www.bossonabudget.com. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next video.